Let me ask you something simple, but quietly powerful. When was the last time you actually felt your birthday? Not merely scrolled past the messages, not the brief thanks you typed back, but felt it, the way you did as a child. The quickened heartbeat at balloons, the small shock of all eyes turning toward you for one tiny sacred day. Now fast forward to adulthood. The date comes and goes. Maybe a call from your mom, maybe a notification or two. Then you move on. You tell people you don't celebrate. You shrug and say, it's just another day. But is it really? People who treat their birthday like a normal day are not necessarily cold, emotionless, or detached. Often they're the most reflective of us. People who learn to hide expectations because disappointment taught them to. Birthdays function as emotional mirrors. They show how we feel about being alive, how comfortable we are with attention, and how we respond when the world places a tiny spotlight on us. When someone says, I don't care about my birthday, what are they really saying? Sometimes it means I don't need validation anymore. Other times it means I stopped expecting it. Those two statements are markedly different. One can be a mature preference, the other can be a protective withdrawal. Let's be precise. Psychologists describe one common pattern here as avoidant validation behavior. Repeated disappointment trains the brain to lower anticipatory hopes. If expecting joy repeatedly leads to pain, the logical adaptation is to expect less. That's not a failure, it's emotional economy. It conserves resources so you won't be hurt again. But that economy has a cost. The shield that protects can also dull delight. Over time, the heart that learned to protect itself becomes overly careful. You begin to walk through your own life like a guest at someone else's party, polite, observant, a little distant. Think about how many of us hear someone say, I don't do birthdays. Later that night, that person quietly replays the day. Who didn't message? Who forgot? Who said nothing? Even the most guarded mind keeps a tally. Pretending not to care is still a form of caring, refracted and inverted. That tension is not evidence of emotional failure, it's proof of adaptation. Other people grow out of birthday excitement for a different reason: peace. They have learned to find meaning in ordinary days. Where once joy was located in a calendar date, it now lives in daily routines, small rituals, steady presence. Joy becomes internalized rather than scheduled. That is a form of maturity. But again, it's not the only story. There's a deeper layer. Birthdays are a built-in checkpoint of temporal self-awareness, a psychological phrase that means the date forces you to compare the person you are today with the person you were a year ago. For some, that comparison is comforting. For others, it is a private mirror that exposes gaps between goals and outcomes, between expectation and reality. When the gap is uncomfortable, it's simpler to blur the day into the rest of the week. Not denial, preservation. And then there's culture and role. If you grew up being the responsible one, the giver, the person who organizes everyone else's joy, you may have internalized the message, my joy can wait. Over time, you remember everyone else's important days and forget your own. Celebration begins to feel awkward. Big gestures feel intrusive because vulnerability feels costly. Yet even in self-reliance, something endures. Many who treat their birthday like normal days quietly hope someone remembers. It's the subtle test: who reaches out without being asked. That small, unsentimental check is not weakness, it's humanity. We can become emotionally independent and still yearn for connection. Those two truths coexist. Psychology also gives us helpful terms here: secure attachment, avoidant attachment, and self-concordant motivation. Someone with earned secure attachment may quietly celebrate according to inner values: a walk, a home-cooked meal, a private hour of reflection. That's not emptiness, it's alignment. Self-concordant motivation means your actions match your values. Your celebration becomes a reflection of what matters, not a performance for others. But avoidance strategies can also mask unresolved wounds. When affection was inconsistent in childhood, people adapt by lowering their emotional stakes. They stop asking, they stop expecting. That adaptation is sensible in the short term, but in the long term, it can make life quieter than it needs to be. The irony is that the people who most give to others often forget to receive. So what does treating a birthday like a normal day actually signal? Sometimes it signals inner peace, joy redistributed into ordinary moments. Sometimes it signals protection, a practical decision to avoid recurring disappointment. And often, most honestly, it signals both. A person who has integrated strengths and scars, who chooses quieter celebration while still secretly hoping to be seen. Here's the compassionate takeaway. If your birthday feels ordinary, you are not broken. You are not ungrateful. You are evolving. You're learning that meaning does not require noise. You may also be softly missing the thrill you once had, and that is okay. Missing your younger self is not regression, it is memory. It is evidence that the child who once believed in midnight wishes still lives inside you. And so what can we do? If you're the kind who makes everyone else feel seen, let others give back. Allow yourself to accept recognition without suspicion. If you're the kind who prefers privacy, honor that preference, but permit a small kindness. One voice message, one text, one person who remembers without being asked. These tiny acts carry more weight than we think. Because ultimately, a birthday is less about age and more about presence. When you were a child, the world celebrated your existence. As an adult, the most radical act is often to remember your own presence. To say to yourself quietly, we made it another year. To acknowledge growth, survival, mistakes, and continued becoming. So if your birthday ever feels like just another day, don't judge it, honor it. If the feeling is contentment, celebrate in the way that suits you. If the feeling is a soft ache, allow someone to soothe it. Either way, give yourself permission to be both independent and in need of connection. That is human. That is whole. You don't have to make a wish tonight to mean one. You already are one, a living continuation of every version of yourself that made it here. That is worth celebrating, quietly or loudly, every single year.